2011, and in 2017 she won the Kurt Skog Memorial Award. Apart from journalism, ma'am has completed 3 fellowships, co-written a book, and written a movie script as well. Interestingly, she also teaches journalism. The session will be held in 2 phases. First, the keynote address by ma'am for about 35 minutes, followed by a Q&A session for about 15 minutes. Without any further delay, I request ma'am to begin with her address. Thank you.
Ma'am, I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Well, thank you, and thanks to your entire team for giving me this opportunity to interact with the bright minds who hold the greatest promise of making this world a better place. So I've been asked to speak about journalism with impact, media challenges in India, and the road ahead. And I would like to start with an apology that what I speak today may sound like a rant. Because I'm frustrated. Having spent years on the field, risked life to get stories, having seen, seen things I wish nobody ever has to, I suffer disillusionment like never before. And I'm more angry than sad about the state of journalism in my country at the moment. Mahatma Gandhi had argued that one of the objects of a newspaper is to fearlessly expose popular defects. A vital role of media is to speak truth to power and ensure accountability and transparency. Now, do you see the media seeking accountability from the powerful today? Lord Northcliffe, a British newspaper owner in 19th and earlier 20th century, had said, news is something someone wants to suppress. Everything else is just advertising. And Philip Graham, a publisher of the Washington Post in the 1960s, had said news is the first rough draft of history. Now, if we were to believe these statesmen, it would seem there is a constant effort for history to be appropriated, changed, or narrativized. This is possibly laden with multiple questions. It is common for history to change. As time marches on, perspective changes, interpretations change, sources change, and so does history. But it pushes us to an anxiety of historical narratives being controlled by those in power for the have-nots to stay deprived while the haves consolidate power. Now, information is a great power. And I have often said that the World War III will not be fought with weapons but with information. And information is controlled by media. So who controls the media? That's something I do not need to tell you. If you make a rough list of media conglomerates in the country right now and look at their financial associations and money flow, you'll know. The state wanting to control media is nothing new. Every political party in every country aspires to do that. It manages to do that to a certain extent. And that is why we have indicators such as Press Freedom Index, an annual ranking of countries on the basis of press freedom to news organization, journalists, and netizens in various countries, in which India ranks 142 out of 180. So the information we receive is not free from influences. And who are these influences? The politicians and corporates. I remember in 2010, I had visited a district correspondent of the Statesman, one of the oldest newspapers in India, in West Midnapur, West Bengal. The nameplate on his modest 2-story house carried the words, Mr. Shyam Sundar Roy, staff reporter, The Statesman. And that very plaque, the nameplate, it infused so much pride. I was based in Kolkata at that time, and on my visit to Midnapur, Shyam Sundar, Mr. Roy offered to take me to a press conference in the district headquarters. He was around 60 years old then, or probably more. He looked older, and he was probably working on extension at that time. The district magistrate's press room was full of journalists from different media organizations, local, national, hyper-local, from various newspapers, channels. And that particular moment was also the peak of Maoist extremism in Bengal, in West Bengal, in Midnapur. And Midnapur was one of the hot places on the red zone that witnessed incessant killings. It was mainly 3 places, Midnapur, Purulia, and Bankura. These 3 districts were the red districts in West Bengal. And I had entered the room early, taken my place on the back benches as I was only there to observe. And a lot of reporters stood up to greet the DM when he entered the room. People were just adjusting their mics. People were settling down when Mr. Roy entered. The DM stood up to greet him. Mr. Roy measured his steps, sat down, and the conference began. And reporters asked questions, difficult, accusatory, but the DM answered all. Journalists had the right to press conferences at that time. They had the right to ask administration questions. They had the right to demand answers, and the DM was obligated to answer them. It was also the time when CPIM was in power in West Bengal, and together with the joint forces, CPM local leaders were exploiting villagers, branding small kids of class 5 Maoists, raping women. Every now and then a CPM leader would be executed by a Maoist. And then, they would attack a combing party. The villagers were caught in the crossfire between the Maoists and the forces, along with the local, with the forces who had joined hands with who were basically acting on the behest of the CPM leaders. Now, in those days of peaked armed violence, the media did not falter from asking questions. The authorities answered, and they were pulled up if they couldn't. Being a journalist was a respectable profession. You did not have money, since journalism has always been a lowest paid job, one of the lowest paying jobs in India. But you had respect. Now we are known as prostitutes. And to be very honest, whenever I meet people while commuting in plane, in flights or in trains, I avoid telling people I'm a journalist. Earlier, I used to tell them journalist, and for the next couple of hours, we would be interacting, having all kind of discussions. But nowadays, I avoid telling I'm a journalist. The problem with media right now is that a handful of powerful media owners, anchors, and editors who sit in AC offices in their ivory towers, who enjoy their parties and cocktails with the politicians and corporates, and who control the editorial and financial policies of news organizations, are discrediting and harming the profession, more than the actual journalists who are acting on the field. They are undermining and harming the profession, which we all have entered, for love and passion, and with the desire to bring a change. Never has there been a time in history when we needed to overthrow this hegemony so profoundly. Indian media has never been like the Western media. It has played a great role in the freedom movement. In our country, media is public service. It is essential service for a reason. But it is increasingly being controlled by the corporates who have other interests than to give voice to the voiceless. You see lateral media expansion or cross-media ownership, where channels or newspapers belong to a company who also owns a real estate business or oil or telecommunication. Now, they cannot question the powerful only because if they do so, their other businesses would suffer. And obviously, in covering certain issues, they have to take care of their other agendas, their business agendas. Mahatma Gandhi foresaw this. And just so the press is saved from this eternal tension between capitalism and socialism, he proposed media should be run on the model of trusteeship. Today, newspapers that have trusteeship models are on the verge of on the verge of death, because of market consolidation by the corporates, for whom media is not public service but a profit-making venture. Whichever party comes to power, these media conglomerates will change sides, join hands with the political powers to rule the public. So is social media a solution? Absolutely not. The Facebook Inc. or Google is one of the largest information corporate now. No matter how much we criticize TikTok for its content or whatever it has done, the banning of the platform only consolidated Facebook's power. So yeah, we consume, whatever we consume will not be controlled by a Chinese company now, but a US company. And that anyway, that control is that a company which anyway controls anything that we consume nowadays, because all other verticals are controlled by them. Media has always been elitist in India. It has always served a particular section of people. Our newsrooms are still dominated by heterosexual upper caste Hindu men, and in the name of reporting on issues of the marginalized, they pandered appropriation day in and day out. Journalists, whether they are affiliated to any organization or not, are routinely exploited, silenced, and suppressed. A lot of people fight, a lot of people leave newsrooms But a lot of people don't really have the option because that's their only job, and they have to keep on working to get salaries. Even if they have to kill their zamir, as we say, because they have to, at the end of the day, they have to pay school fees of their children, or they have to feed their families. And they just cannot leave the profession overnight. It's a tough decision. Because I have fought quite a lot from one newsroom to another newsroom. I've been fighting for so many years, and I'm also, very tired. I got really tired because I've never been able to take care of my family, to be very honest. Half a decade ago, a lot of promising news websites started in India, and we were hopeful that they would reclaim space for good journalism. But then soon we saw them falling into the same pit. The distinct line between news, analysis, and opinion is constantly blurring. Journalism is now mixed with activism, and that's a dangerous combination. Most of the platforms that claim of doing good journalism are only belting out opinions. If you just look at the news and opinion ratio on such websites, the good ones, as we say, the morally upright one, it shows the moral grandstanding that they take and end up alienating themselves from the masses. How much ground reporting do we see nowadays? Newsrooms have a serious problem of resource allocation. There is not enough funding for ground reportage, and that is exactly the reason why they always lose touch with reality. They are always trapped in their own filter bubble. They're always trapped in their own balloon. Several years ago, I met a woman who had come to the newspaper office I was working in hope of getting her troubles resolved. And in those times, people would just walk into a newsroom hoping that they would meet some reporter. They didn't know the name of the reporter. They would just come to the newspaper reception and say that, I want to meet, one of your reporters, and I have this problem or that problem. And the receptionist would connect, somebody or the other, some reporter or the other. This woman, her brother-in-law had beaten up her sister very badly, and she could not survive. Of the two kids left behind, the man wanted custody of the son, and the woman feared that the daughter would be sold off to a red light area. The man was also very pally with the local police station in charge, and so he was constantly threatening this woman who was now taking care of the children. So this woman was these kids' Masi. And this woman also came from a very backward family. So her husband was also not willing to get into all these kind of troubles. He could only take care of the kids, yes, because they did not have any children of their own. But getting into all these kind of legal pangas and these police cases and all that the husband didn't want. So anyway, this man was constantly threatening this woman who was taking care of the children after their mother was killed. And the police had also refused to act because obviously they were hand in gloves. So I wrote the story. The police was forced to act. The man was arrested and restrained from harming the children. And for me, that was an impact, even if very local. It was a very big impact for me because it actually brought change in somebody's life. Now, the definition of impact in newsrooms nowadays, it has changed completely. Impact is when you write about stuff and force the government or the people in power to act, fostering well-being of the society at large. However, impact nowadays is how many likes or shares you got on your story. So it's just social media metrics or TRPs in case of channels. And critiquing just the face of a particular political party won't do. Like, this person, Rahul Gandhi is a demon or Narendra Modi is a demon. This kind of narrative is exactly what is harming the overall media narrative that we have in the country nowadays. Because people have stopped writing about local issues, the ground issues, and people do not have the opportunity to realize how relevant journalism is in their lives. The political parties with aggressive social media campaigning have tried to make journalism irrelevant, and that happens everywhere. It's not just in India. Everywhere this kind of a tussle goes on, where every political party is going to, tell the public that the media is irrelevant. But it is also the media's role to fight back and ensure in-depth analytical report on, on-ground reportage to stay relevant. But Indian media failed because even news online portals, people who are running these news online portals or who started these portals, they have also inherited the same elitism from the legacy media, because at one point of time they were editors in these legacy media organizations. And this elitism is costing India a lot, especially in the age of disinformation, when more and more people are consuming news filtered through social media algorithms. However, I feel all is not lost. And I also see a lot of hyper-local sites doing great journalism nowadays. Some sites have come up in Uttar Pradesh. Some YouTube-based channels are there in Uttar Pradesh, in Bihar, in Madhya Pradesh. A lot of sites are coming up in Kerala. A lot of sites are now coming up in West Bengal, and they are very hyper-local. So they just deal with the local, very local issues, and they're talking about the kind of things that the public is facing there. On the ground reportage, and not just demonizing the top political leaders. So I think there is an ardent need for diversity in newsrooms, in media voices. There is a need for grassroots reportage to be supported and promoted. Because nowadays, if a new online platform comes up, it is often seen as a competition by those who are already established in the field. And in India right now, the journalist should see anybody doing good journalism as an ally and not as a competitor, because the time is such. It is also a very crucial moment when journalists should ask an existential question of what exactly makes a journalist. An institutional affiliation, that you are affiliated with this newsroom or you are affiliated with that newsroom, or the hundreds of journalists who toil on the ground, thousands of journalists who toil on the ground with or without organizational support or press card. Now, there's this entire politics of how people actually get press cards, those government press cards in media houses, and that's a different story altogether. But we need to, question whether these people who are without press cards and who are doing, who are writing great stories are the journalists or people who merely have a press card or an institutional affiliation. So, and there's so many of them. If you look at the list of people who are imprisoned, journalists who are imprisoned for the stories that they have done, who've been attacked, who've been killed for the stories that they have done, for taking on, sand mafia, or for, talking against big corporates, you'd be surprised. So a handful of editors in legacy media want to dominate that already exclusionary narrative of who is a journalist. Whenever there is who should be a journalist, and these, these big editors, they come up and they say, oh, journalist is this person, journalist is that person, and that person is always, it's basically, it kind of always fits their framework, which they have in mind, and that framework excludes more than it includes. So it is high time that we journalists ask this existential question and topple this information hegemony. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Before I start with the questions that we received through the registration form, I would like to tell all the participants, all the attendees, that everyone can keep sending their questions on the chat box. Okay, ma'am, the first question that we received is how Indian media can break the shackles of demagoguery.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question?
How Indian media can break the shackles of demagoguery. I think I'm spelling it right.
I don't understand the question. I'm so sorry.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I can hear you. What's the word? I'm not getting the word.
Yeah, the word is demagoguery.
Ma'am, it's demagoguery.
Demagoguery. Okay.
Okay. Just a second. What should I say? It's just by doing good journalism, and that's the only solution. Just by writing about issues that should be written about. I mean, bringing in more and more voices from different kind of places. See, all political parties are going to populism is something very common. It's inherent in all democracies. Populism is going to be there, and anyway, India is an emergent democracy. So That's something. So, but yeah, the only thing that the news media should be concentrating on is not getting deviated by this populism, which it's failing to do, I believe, and just write about issues that should be written about. Increase more ground reportage. Give people, because when we started our career, our editors had told us never underestimate the readers and don't treat them as if they are fools. You don't serve them news on a platter. It's not like that. Don't underestimate their intelligence. So I think we have a good informed public in India. And if we give them quality content, if we give them good journalism, they have the capacity to think of their own and make decisions on their own, and not fall for populism. Our main problem is that a lot of news organizations are now, they themselves are getting into populism, and they themselves are pandering propaganda, and that's the big issue.
Okay, the next question is, will the Indian media industry ever come out of the deep recession it is in now? And the second part says, will there be a good reporter job for an aspiring journalist?
Well, the deep recession, it is, there are a lot of factors, because one, we've been already suffering from this onslaught of online. The print newspapers were suffering from the onslaught of online. So when I say resource allocation, it's also about, well, when online media actually began in India, it got into the model of aggregation. There was something called aggregation at that time, and this was a failed model which Huffington Post had started, and it had failed, so it was stopped in the West. But India adopted it, this failed model, and they kept doing it for quite some time. That was borderline plagiarism, to be very honest. And then, so the newspapers were suffering because of this all the while. But then, there have been a lot of what should I say, thinking, and people are taking different kind of, innovative, they've been coming up with different kind of innovative business models to, keep print relevant. Right now, even though the English print organizations are on the downhill, they're not making any profit, but the regional media is on the rise. They are, they have a significant growth. So, and also, talking about jobs, I think there is a lack of transparency when it comes to media hiring process, and how the newsrooms actually, build their workforce, because there is always space for good people. But at the same time, those are not advertised properly, or, a lot of internal referencing works. So the way news, and now there's something called apprenticeship has come up, which is again, which is kind of, I believe it's a talent killer. So yeah, no, jobs will be there. They will be there, but yes, it's going to continue to be a very exploitative market with low salaries, where if you have done some good work, and if you can show that yes, these are my work samples, then it may work. But opportunities keep coming up. You just need to grab them. But yes, there are fewer opportunities. That's true.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question says, can journalism today, under the prevailing circumstances in our country, be practiced freely?
Absolutely not. The reason why I left active journalism, because I just got frustrated. I got tired of fighting all the time. I left so many organizations. I always had a fight with my boss over stories that, and I said, if I'm not given the freedom to write what I found on the ground, then what's the point of working here? But not many people can take the decisions that I have taken. I've suffered for the decisions that I've taken. And it's becoming extremely difficult to do independent journalism in India at the moment, and this is exactly what I tried to speak about during my talk. But yeah, the situation is very difficult.
The next question is a bit descriptive. It says, honestly, there is two types of media existing in our country, either favoring the right wing or the left wing. So for a lame person, I would say, rather say, what he or she should do to get the real distinguishing factor between a real news and a fake news.
Well, the first thing that you should be doing is you should be Googling about a couple of, short-term courses maybe about how to spot fake news. That's something you should do. What I could do is, this kind of leaning was always there in media. It is more pronounced nowadays. Some newspapers are left, some newspapers are right. Some newspapers are borderline left, some newspapers are borderline right. So there's always an agenda. So what I used to do as a journalism student was, subscribe newspapers from different organizations and then balance the content out. So there always used to be 3 newspapers in my house. Now you have internet. So if you read news online, then, you just make a mental map of newspapers that you think are right and you think are left. Now, it also depends, what exactly you call a news website. Do you consider Swarajya magazine as a news website? Do you consider Op India as a news website? That's something to be debated. So, but you should make a list and then, compare the articles yourself. You balance out, take everything with a pinch of salt. You should not be trusting anybody blindly. And yes, there are a lot of very easy courses online which will help you. For example, there are easy tools like Google reverse image search, which you can just you can do on your mobile phone to see if the article has been fact checked, so you don't you don't end up consuming fake news. And that's about it.
The next question is, it says that what can we as students do to ensure accountability and transparency from the government for the protection of free press?
Uh, well, I think you should be concentrating on your studies, understand everything, what is going on around you, hear both the sides patiently, and support media that you think are doing, good journalism. That's about it. Because, but first you need to build yourself first. Complete your education because you're undergrad college, right? Hindu college is an undergrad college. So yeah, just concentrate on your studies. There's time. And yes, when you really feel compelled to get into something, when you really want to, there are issues which you cannot compromise with, or you cannot sit silent, then yes, you absolutely hit the road if you have to, which is everybody's right.
Okay. Ma'am, Joyita Banerjee asks that the Scandinavian countries who ranked highest on the freedom of press and media index are better because they're always politically neutral and they treat journalism out of the commercial context, unlike in India. Because Indian journalists tend to align with the political stringently and selling news is more popular than telling news. So the question she puts forward is how would pure strand journalism survive in the longer run when consumers are consuming more of the crap news content such as Saas Bahu, Sazish, etc.
Well, there is something called hierarchy of aesthetics. So we cannot really blame people who consume Saas Bahu stuff. We cannot really blame people who watch cringeworthy videos on TikTok. Because then again, we are we do not really know what kind of things affect whom in what way. And whatever we perceive from a pedestal, the kind of privileges that we have in our lives. So it's not about judging, but yes, your question has several layers, I feel. Like the Scandinavian countries also have populism. But yes, they are still untouched by, at least the media enjoys press freedom. The condition in the state of media in Scandinavian countries can nowhere be compared with our country, which is one of the most populous countries in the world, which has a very different party system. So these two parts of the world cannot be compared at all. But in our country, as I said, you need to talk about local issues more and more. I mean, if you give them the same kind of content, like you're dressing up in fake costumes and these melodramatic anchors doing all kind of theatrics on national TV. If you give them, if you kind of, give them Saas Bahu material on news channels every day, then that is what they are going to see. And if you tell them about, your local issues like the overflowing drain in front of your house, or the garbage dump which has not been cleaned, or the local hospital which is, selling spurious medicines, then that will become relevant. So this, in journalism, we have this basic law about, distance, time, proximity. So these kind of things should be followed. And obviously there is a lot of demand about these issues, and people are going to listen, and people are going to consume that, which is happening in case of hyperlocal news. Hyperlocal news is popular only because of this reason, because people find it relevant.
Okay, ma'am, Akshay Singh asks, with changing times, politics, technology, and corporate culture, how does one maintain the sanctity?
I think the sanctity of journalism is a very fluid. There is no boundary to journalism. It's a very fluid term, and it is also very subjective. Sanctity of journalism is basically, in India anyway, it has always been subjective, because, for example, Press Council of India, they always had a set of rules which were, it was always, it depended on your moral good, or, how you want to kind of do good. It basically kind of believed that every human being is, a journalist will always be a good human being, and he cannot be corrupted. So I think sanctity of journalism, we do not really need to maintain the sanctity of journalism. What we need to do is promote more and more voices, diversify media scene. We should help reporters journalists from tribal areas and rural areas to come up and tell their own stories, and not just big babus from big cities to go to their places and report and tell stories with their own privileged lens. That is what is more important.
Another question from her is that how can journalists be made more accountable for their actions and words, especially if they are caught spreading misinformation and fomenting tension between different groups of people?
Well, we already have legal provisions in place. But the problem is, in our country right now, those legal provisions are not being implemented. And now, it is not just a problem now. This has been a problem for a very long time. That even though our legal provisions are very exhaustive, we have a law for everything, those are not implemented. Implementation is a big issue. So I think anybody who's pandering misinformation, first of all, these terms, fake news, misinformation, disinformation, they should be understood properly. Fake news is a very big term. Fake news consists of disinformation and misinformation. Disinformation means something, which, like when you are deliberately spreading factually incorrect erroneous statements, then that's disinformation. When you are doing it deliberately. When you are not doing it deliberately, that's misinformation. So for disinformation, now we have sustained disinformation campaigns in our country. And for that, there are legal provisions, but they are not being implemented, and that's the problem. So we should be pressurizing the government to act. But probably the government also wants, the government probably benefits from these campaigns, and because of which, it's not acting. So, yeah.
Yeah, the next question is from Shivangi Gupta. She asks, what are your views on the subscription-based models like that of News Laundry? Do you think it could pan out in the country in the future?
I think these models are very, I quite understand why these models are here. A lot of Western, very big, Western news outlets are also doing it. But I have my own personal reservations, because I think while it's absolutely true that news should be, people should be paying for the news, because if the corporates pay it, the corporates are going to own it. If the government pays for it, the government is going to own news. So the only way for public to own news and make it the way they want to is to, contribute and, fund newspapers or news. But at the same time, I do not really agree with the idea of paywall, because then it's exclusionary. A lot of people who cannot subscribe are, do not have access to the news. And information and news is something which should never ever be, held back from anybody, whether or not they can pay.
The next question is the New Yorker and the Atlantic, two popular magazines, endorsed Joe Biden for presidency. So, should publications and media organizations endorse political candidates?
Now, this is a very interesting question because, uh, well, how should I put it politely? See, if we were to kind of at times, I think the media should not endorse anybody first. That's the ground rule. The media should never endorse anybody. However, if there is a man and a buffoon, fighting election against each other, then unprecedented times need unprecedented measures. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, another question is from again Joyita Banerjee. The journalists blame the government for imposing regulations, and the government bashes journalists by crushing their access to Article 19. How to end the blame game and reach a mediation for the greater good?
Okay, this question is already here in the chat box, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, the blame game is never going to end, and that's the fun of it. So, and this blame game is also very healthy. This is good because why do you fight? It's basically to check each other's powers. So it's in a way good. The government imposing regulations. What kind of regulations are you talking about? I need a little bit of clarity. Yes, the government will always try to impose regulation because free press is the biggest enemy of any populist government. And the journalists are, the freedom of expression that the journalists enjoy is also becoming a very, very debatable area at the moment, I feel, because in the name of freedom of expression, a lot of thing is going on. But this is a very sensitive topic, and this needs to be dealt with carefully. I cannot really just give a very rushed opinion about it. But yes, this blame game will go on, and this is also this kind of signifies a healthy place where there's a scope for this blame game.
The next question is, it says that, do you think that PCI and TRAI are puppet legislations that hold no water in real?
Yes, I definitely think so, because if you look at the people who are controlling, who are at the helm of affairs in these organizations, they're politically elected. So they are not the people who would. There used to be a time I have attended a couple of PCI Press Council of India proceedings, and I have seen PCI cracking whip on Times of India, and they said that 95% of complaints that we received this year were against Times of India, and the rest of 5%. This is several years ago, and the rest 5% were from against all the other media organizations put together. But the fine, they imposed a fine, and the fine was of 2 lakh rupees. So 2 lakh rupees was like peanuts for Times of India. So it hardly mattered. So these bodies, they do not really hold any water. But yes, it's they were mainly meant so the newspapers, the media organizations are ashamed. They feel a little bit ashamed about what they are doing, but nowadays news organizations are completely shameless, so it doesn't work.
Okay, the next question is rather specific. It says, what do you think about the Parliament's plea to the masses to agitate against Arnab's arrest, the same figures who never spoke against such incidences for others?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question?
The question says, what do you think about the Parliament's plea to the masses to agitate against Arnab's arrest, the same figures who never spoke up against such incidences in the past?
Well, this is a very good evidence of Arnab being a party spokesperson, isn't it? because I don't consider him a journalist at all. And that is the reason why I said that we journalists should be asking this existential question of who is a journalist? Somebody with an affiliation, or somebody, who's been doing good journalism for, or, those freelancers who are, working day in and day out, they're going to the fields every day, risking their lives for a story. So we know that Arnab Goswami has lost the plot. He lost the plot a long time ago. His case has nothing to do with freedom of expression. His case is about state excesses, Maharashtra's state excesses. His case is about how commitment of suicide, misuse of power by both state and media houses. His organization, his case has nothing to do with press freedom, and it should not be compared with other cases where journalists have been arrested for stories, because it's just an insult to those journalists who were arrested for their work, for their stories that they did. So this, whatever this, asking people to, these campaigns in support of Arnab and these, quotes by different kind of politicians, it just proves Arnab's position in the party and nothing else.
Okay, you have reported on human rights abuses in Ethiopia, one of the most dangerous countries for journalists. So what were the challenges you encountered and the lessons you learned from the experience?
It's a very long story. There were a lot of challenges. I had gone to Ethiopia on. I did not have enough money. I did not have proper access. It was parachute journalism, which I did, which I'm very critical of when others do it, but I did it. And the reason behind it was because, nobody was able to penetrate the area for a very long time. And the emergency had just lifted, and I was around, so I thought, let me take a try. There were a lot of challenges. I cannot just, I don't know where to start and where to end. There were so many challenges. What I learned from it was the usual, it's the same story of abuse, it's the same story of exploitation everywhere, whether it's India or whether it's Australia or whether it's Mexico or whether it's India, state versus people. So the government wanting to sell off land of the people to invite FDI. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, the next question is by Vikas Tripathi. He asks, as there are a lot of cases about electronic media currently in court, do you think there will be regulations for TV media soon?
There are already regulations for TV media. As I said, there are regulations for everybody. There was no regulation for online media, but a couple of news portals have come up. They have formed a body and they have released a regulation very recently. So there are already regulations, but they are not followed. There is no mechanism to enforce these regulations, and that's the problem. So people, they just get away violating them.
Okay, the next question is, should social media apps censor fake news or scrutinize political advertisements?
The social media sites, mainly owned by Facebook now. So Facebook, they put together a team of fact checkers. And then during Pulwama and Balakot, these very news organizations who were certified by Facebook for fact checking their content, they were found to be spreading fake news. So the social media organizations, we have to see that they are also corporates, and they are kind of they are involved with the government completely. So their intentions cannot be trusted at all. Because I interviewed a couple of WhatsApp people way back, when the lynching started. I was in a journalism conference in Perugia where, one of the very high officials of WhatsApp had come, and I asked him, and my study was also released there, when I joined more than 200 right-wing WhatsApp groups who were spreading Islamophobic content. So I asked, certain questions to that Facebook person, WhatsApp guy, and he was completely dodgy. So their intentions cannot be trusted at all. These are, after all, corporates, and they will always look after their profit before they do anything. And no,
Okay,
sorry, they
no,
shouldn't be. Yeah, they shouldn't be censoring. They should not be censoring any kind of speech. But yes, speech which is dangerous. There is a clear definition of what is dangerous speech. There's a clear definition of what is hate speech. That should be censored.
okay, Unnati Gupta asks, in the light of the recent digital censorship of environmental websites by the government on the EIA 2020 and the dangers already involved in the environmental journalism and activism, how do you see the media and activists navigating these challenges in this time of an ecological crisis?
This question is very relevant now. Nobody is paying attention to environment at all, because there's so many problems that the people are grappling with. Environment has again been pushed to the back burner, and there are gross violations taking place which nobody has any idea about. There are just a couple of news websites which are writing about it, but then nothing happens. Recently, I don't know if you're talking about the same issue, but MOEF, Ministry of Environment and Forests, what they did to access documents that should be in public domain, they set a fees and they put it behind. But then there was a lot of there was a Twitter storm, and a lot of people protested, and there were a couple of stories after which the MOEF had to remove that wall. So all these kind of, yes, information is the lack of transparency is increasing everywhere, be it environment journalism, environmental issues, or non-profits, or PM cares or whatever. But we should always keep asking for transparency, and that's all that we can do.
Okay, Kush Bansal asked how to break this cycle of crony capitalism in journalism.
You see, I always criticized, a lot of people criticize Times of India, but they would buy it because at the end of the month, Raddi wale ko wahi, they could sell it to the Raddi wala, and get some money back. We really need to think about, what we are, what kind of news are we subscribing to? If you don't agree with the certain newspaper, don't subscribe to those newspapers. If you don't agree with the news channels, make it sure that you let your cable operator know that you don't want them, because a lot of news channels are there by default. So stop watching them. Don't promote them or don't amplify them at all. And that's all that you can do to support and promote, media organizations that are not capitalistic, or that are, doing good work.
Okay, Aniket Kumar wonders why there is a lack of professionalism in journalism.
Yeah, because you see, this is again a very, this has several answers. The answer is not really straight cut, because nowadays journalism schools, a lot of journalists enter the field without proper education. So media literacy is anyway a problem in the country. Then these journalists, they have absolutely no idea about the ethics that should be followed on the ground. Because when we studied, there were a handful of journalism schools. This journalism school boom had just started, and I had the opportunity to study at one of the best places where our teachers would, our teachers taught us about ethics, what should be reported on, what shouldn't, what should you do on the ground. But nowadays, you find a journalism school in every nukkad. And also, there is this trend of, marketability of, whatever sells, journalism is whatever sells. So we have deviated from actually what, where we had started, or what journalism was, or what were the enshrined principles of journalism in our country. And And I think, yeah, these people, in one of the newsrooms, one editor, all of a sudden she came in and she said that, don't hire people from this journalism school because they have a lot of questions about everything. By everything, she meant, about what kind of stories, of ethical concerns. And she said that take students from that journalism school because they know they know to, work on stories that sell. So that's the mindset of a lot of newsrooms nowadays.
Okay, Astha Mohapatra asks, to protect the sanctity of the fourth pillar of democracy, what sort of regulations and steps can be ensured so that TRP manipulation does not occur in India?
I have no idea about TRP manipulation because TV news is something TRP. I don't understand TRPs, so I only know about the controversy that has happened, but I don't really know about TRPs in depth. So that's an answer I'm not qualified enough to answer.
Okay, okay, we have one more question. It says, parents look forward to their kids going into engineering, medical, sports, but journalism has a negative connotation and people perceive it to be informal, risky, and edgy.
Yeah.
So, how to convince parents to view journalism differently?
Well, parents are going to be parents. So that was when I told my parents I want to be a journalist. Even my parents had a problem. But then you fight. You go in and then you just they're just they are concerned because they're very worried about your safety, and that's it. When you explain them, and also yes, it has a negative connotation in our country nowadays. Earlier, when I joined journalism, it was a noble profession, so I could tell my parents, that listen, this is a very nice thing. I want to work because blah 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 blah. But nowadays, what will you tell your parents? So that's a challenge. I understand, but they're after all your parents. Only you can convince them. So you know what to tell them.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. We come to the end of the question and answer round. We don't have any more.
Excuse
Before
me,
we end,
I just had one more
yeah,
question. Can I ask, ma'am, in person?
Yeah, sure, Kush. Go ahead.
All right, ma'am. So, like you said, that the way to break from the cycle of crony capitalism is to push more demand for real, authentic news sources. So, ma'am, in a world where perception and narrative is controlled by these very media houses themselves, and people are very fond of watching these primetime shows, so how to generate that demand? So, my question is, can social media play an important role? Like, for example, alternative media, as we said, like for example, Fire D'Souza does journalism and she publishes daily news on her Instagram feed. So, can that be a tool, effective tool to generate more demand for alternative
Absolutely.
media?
Yes, definitely it can be. Definitely.
So is
Yeah, sorry.
so is social media like the empowerment tool that we are looking for in this 21st century?
See, I believe everything should be taken with a pinch of salt. So social media we should not be over dependent on social media. We should not be ruling out the positives of social media completely. So we always need this balance. So if you're getting good content from social media, good, but you should not be over dependent on social media. And also, one of the very effective ways to break this vicious circle is generate have conversation with your family, have conversation with your parents. Like my parents started consuming fake news very aggressively, and keep sharing things with me. So the first thing I had to do was have a good conversation with my parents and tell them that what are you doing, and not aggressively, just make them understand. Because they also, these people, they come from certain set of values and traditions, and some shackles that they have been shouldering for a very long time. So change begins at home.
Unfortunately, my parents have listened to this advice of yours and they have like changed now. But a lot of people give this counter argument that if it is a national news channel, so how can you discard it completely? You have to say it, you cannot ignore it. So that is a very often counter argument that comes against it. That it is a national media, national news channel. So how can you like completely discard it?
Yeah, well, yes, but then there are other national news. So then you tell them that you see this particular channel A is doing news in this way, channel B is doing news in this way, channel C is doing news in this way. What will you take? What will you select? So give them options. They should be given options. That's one thing. And there are different kind of, as somebody had rightly pointed out, there is left media, there is right media, there is center media. It is also a time when people are forced to take sides. Even people who do not want to take, who do not want to take a side are forced to pick sides. So it's a very difficult situation at the moment. But yes, we have to keep trying.
All right, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
I think that is end. That is all from our side. I request Amitoj, the president of our society, to kindly deliver the key. Thank you.
The entire session was extremely enlightening. I would like to thank Soma ma'am for presiding over for this session on behalf of the entire society, and taking out the time from your busy schedule today. We had a really interactive discussion today about the different media challenges which are there in the country. Um, and it was really great to hear from a person as experienced as yourself about the different intricacies of journalism and the challenges. So once again, thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot. It was wonderful to have you today with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It was lovely. Thank you.
Also, I would like to thank all the attendees who joined in today on this Friday evening. I hope you all have filled out the feedback form. And yes, with that, we come to an end for today's colloquium. We organize one colloquium session every week, so stay tuned for the next session. Thank you.